Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. We have a couple really interesting lunar events that are coming up in the lead up to President Nelson's 101st birthday. In fact, one of them is going to happen the day before. And I want to show you what to expect. And for me, it's a little bit eyebrow raising, but to fully appreciate it, I want to take you through briefly the history of all these lunar events that have taken place during President Nelson's time as president of the church. I have a spreadsheet called Signs Moon, and I've actually added a few items here as well as a few columns just to more easily visualize these different types of lunar events. I already had this one for blue moons, but I've added lunar eclipse, supermoon, and solar eclipse. I've added these columns. And the first item that I have on here is actually just a few months before he became president of the church. And I think that we need to start with this, okay? Because I feel like, for me, one of the more compelling signs that have gone along with President Nelson specifically that seem to like point to President Nelson are signs having to do with the moon. And for all I know, maybe it's always been that way with every president of the church, because the first item that I have here, this was during President Monson's presidency, where we had this total solar eclipse, right? The Great American Solar Eclipse. The first one, there was the first one in 2017 and then the one in 2024. This first one, it happened on President Monson's 90th birthday. And I think it was Elder Stevenson who pointed that out in General Conference. It was in his conference talk. So we had the sun being blocked by the moon. This was on President Monson's 90th birthday, not his 91st, not his 89th, not his 90, whatever, on his 90th. And I feel like that's significant because it's just one of those nice round numbers. This same solar eclipse had a path of totality that went over Jackson County, far west, Adamantiaman, and it had to take that specific path. If it had varied by just a few miles, it would not have covered all three of these places. Okay. So then the next one that I have is during President Nelson's presidency. In fact, this was 17 days after he became the next president of the church. And I highlight the number 17 because he's the 17th president of the church. So it's like there's a little clue right there. But what we have going on here is that it was in the articles that we've read, like right here in this title, they called it a super blue blood moon, meaning that it was a supermoon where you have the moon in a point of its orbit that's close to the Earth so that it looks larger. It was a blood moon, or in other words, a lunar eclipse. And then it was also a blue moon. A blue moon is when you have two full moons in the same month. There's actually different types of blue moons. There's seasonal blue moons. This one was a monthly blue moon, which is why I have this here in column D. So 17 days before President Nelson became the 17th president of the church, there was a super blue blood moon, which is really rare. From what we've read in the articles that were published, the last time that happened was 1866. Now, you see that I added new to the far left. I've already had this on the spreadsheet for a while, but the new piece that I added to this is the fact that in 1866, that was during the main period of the Pioneer Trek West. It didn't all just happen in 1847. It took a couple decades. That's a lot of people to move. And so I don't know. It's kind of interesting, taking the Saints from Illinois to this new promised land in Utah. And it makes me wonder, is this kind of a foreshadowing of President Nelson leading us to our promised land, the millennium? We've talked about that concept before. Okay, so already two really interesting signs in the heavens having to do with the moon, and seemingly specifically having to do with presidents of the church. Okay, so what's the next one? Well, the next month, there was no full moon in that month because we just had the blue moon, like the two full moons in January. February is a short month. And so that made it so that March also had a blue moon. And it wasn't just any blue moon. This was a blue Paschal moon, referring to Easter, of course. And it happened on the first Saturday of President Nelson's first general conference as president of the church. So, again, it's interesting that it happens during general conference. It's interesting that it's called a blue Paschal moon or an Eastern moon. President Nelson has really brought a lot of focus and gotten the church to focus more on Christ. And so, I don't know. I don't think that that's a coincidence. I don't. Okay. And then I came across this. We'll come back to this we'll talk about it right now. Sorry, this video is a little bit awkward because there's so many things to talk about. But as I was researching the upcoming events between now and President Nelson's birthday, I found out that on July 27th, there was a lunar eclipse, a blood moon, in that it was the longest lunar eclipse of the 21st century, and it will be the longest lunar eclipse. So between 2001 and the year 2100, that was the longest duration for a lunar eclipse during this century. And it just so happens that it took place in President Nelson's first year as president of the church. I need to, oh man, I'm thinking right now, I need to make a separate spreadsheet, yet another spreadsheet, to track all the things that have happened during his first year. There are so many things. I feel like I repeat that phrase like every several videos. This or that happened in the first year of President Nelson's presidency. 2018 really did seem to be a landmark year, and this is just the newest item. Okay, so we have that. Nothing for 2019. On Halloween of 2020, which was a crazy year, there was a blue moon visible across all time zones, which hasn't occurred since 1944. The next Halloween full moon will be in 2039. So I decided to take note of that. I don't know how significant it is, but okay. Okay, now we're going to skip forward to 2023. We had a super blue moon. So a super moon and a blue moon at the same time. And this was 9 days before President Nelson turned 99 on his birthday, September 9th, which is 9/9. 9 days before turning 99 on 9/9, you have this super blue moon. That's just how it worked out. Okay. Then, a few months later, on the 14th of October, there was an annular solar eclipse. The path of annularity passed through Utah, missing all Utah temples except Manti, which at the time was decommissioned, and the Monticello, Utah temple. So the only operating temple that it went over was the Monticello, Utah temple. And I don't have I have a Google Earth map for that, but I've gotten a new computer and I think I need to download the KMZ files and stuff and bring it over. So I can't show that to you, but I can tell you, and you can imagine there's a lot of temples in Utah. And so for a path that wide to go through the state, the only way that it could have gone to miss the maximum number of temples is the path that it took. And this was 7 days after October 7th, when the war started in Israel. So yeah, General Conference, 7 days later, you had the war break out in Israel. And then 7 days after that, you have this annular solar eclipse that goes through Utah and misses all the temples except for one that's in operation. Okay. And then the next one was the total solar eclipse in April of 2024. It was the day after General Conference. And that Sunday of General Conference was President Nelson and President Oak's 40th anniversary as apostles. It's already mind-blowing enough that it's the day after conference, but it's also the day after their 40th anniversary. And then on top of that, the path of totality passed over the Sacred Grove and the Kirtland Temple. I was there at the Kirtland Temple to record that. It was an amazing experience. And then I'll skip that next thing. That's the subject for another video. Okay, later that year, we have another super blue moon. And this one was 21 days, or in other words, 3 times 7, 21 days before President Nelson turned 100 years old. And then September 17th of 2024, there was a super blood moon. This was a harvest moon because they have like their different, names of the different. Oh wait, no, that's for blue moon. I don't know. They called it a harvest moon, whatever. Super moon, blood moon, quite rare according to NASA. Just want to point out, September is the month of President Nelson's birthday, and it happened on the 17th. And like I said earlier, President Nelson is the 17th president of the church. So we have a lot of rare lunar events taking place during President Nelson's time. And a lot of them seem to be pointing to him and also to the church specifically. Okay, next. Okay, now we're up to 2025. So before I show you the 2 events that are about to take place, earlier this year, this was just shortly after I moved to Independence and I was able to view this from our new home, there was a blood moon. This one was the 7th total lunar eclipse of President Nelson's presidency. Okay. This year in January, on the 14th of January, he hit his 7-year anniversary, which I find significant because it seems like President Nelson himself has given a lot of emphasis to the number 7. That is a topic for another video. I've done that a few times over. But if you've been watching my channel, there's a lot of 7s associated with President Nelson that it seems like he intentionally does. Like he does certain things in 7s. So on the 14th, which is 2 times 7, and 2 months after his anniversary on January 14th, you have the 7th total lunar eclipse of President Nelson's presidency. That day also happened to be the 187th anniversary of Far West being designated as church headquarters, the 181st anniversary of a revelation that gave the official name of the Council of 50. They're the ones that tried to plan, under the direction of Joseph Smith. This was the council that tried to plan the political kingdom of God for the millennium. It was also the first day of Purim, which is a Hebrew or a Jewish holiday. And it was right in the middle of Ramadan, the 14th day. Okay, now we have 2 more. And I think I'm going to publish this on the 23rd. So if I do, unless there's like some kind of breaking news or something, this is going to happen tonight. So we have a rare black moon 17 days before President Nelson's 101st birthday. 17. Let me show you. I went to a time and date. There's this calculator where you can calculate how many days between 2 dates. So August 23rd is when the black moon is going to happen. And then his birthday is on September 9th. 17 days. You have the calendar down here. Let me just show you. Sometimes people get confused because you can include the end date. But you start on the 23rd, right? And you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So it's 17 days. 17 days before his birthday. So it seems as though the moon has to do things that highlight President Nelson and his birthday in that he's the 17th president of the church. And it did the same thing with President Monson. He had that total solar eclipse over Jackson County, Adamantium, far west, on his 90th birthday. It's so unlikely. It's so unlikely. Okay, so let me just show you a couple things here. This is space.com. Black moon. What is it and why does it occur? The next black moon will occur on August 23rd, 2025. This is considered a black moon under the definition of the third new moon in a season of 4 new moons. So it's just a new moon, but it has to do with when it occurs and in relation to other new moons in the season. Later on, it says a black moon is a fairly rare occurrence. These seasonal black moons occur about once every 33 months, according to time and date. Okay, so it's not really, really rare. Once every about like 3 years or so. But this time around, again, it's happening 17 days before President Nelson's 101st birthday. So, okay. And then here's the next one. We have a lunar eclipse, a blood moon. That's going to take place the day before his birthday. I know it says September 7th right here, but it's between September 7th and September 8th, and his birthday is on the 9th. So this is the day, it's, the night before, you get what I'm saying. It's the day before his birthday. Now, I do want to point something out. I can't remember the first article that I saw, but as I was researching it, I came across this article from I don't even know this website, Earth. And then up here it says vocal.media/Earth. It's some weird, well, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not familiar with this website, but it has an article that says once in a lifetime spectacle, the 25th total lunar eclipse set to dazzle billions. So there's some inaccuracies here. And I just want to point out, you can't believe everything that you read. This seems like just any other news website, kind of. It says this is going to be a rare super blood moon. And then it says it's going to be the longest and most visible lunar eclipse in history. No, there's a couple inaccuracies there. It's not a supermoon. This is BBC Sky and Night magazine. This was written in January. And it says that in 2025, there are going to be 3 supermoons, but they're going to be October 7th, November 5th, and December 4th. So no, this will not be a supermoon. It also says that it's going to be the longest and most visible lunar eclipse in history. And I'm glad that they said that, because that made me search, because I wanted to verify. And I came across this Earth and Sky article. This is a reputable website. Century's longest lunar eclipse, July 27th. Okay, and this is what we covered before. This is how I found that the longest duration lunar eclipse for this century was during President Nelson's first year as president of the church. So that is also not true. It's not a supermoon. It's not the longest and most visible lunar eclipse in history. Although this part is accurate, giving nearly 7 billion people a front row seat to this event. Okay, so let me show you the source that we are going to use, the credible source, Live Science. Where can you see the September 7th blood moon total lunar eclipse? And again, it says September 7th through 8th. On the night of September 7th through 8th, Earth will pass directly between the sun and the full moon in this year's second and final total lunar eclipse. Spanning more than 5 hours, the celestial event will peak with an impressive 82-minute totality phase, when Earth's massive shadow will plunge the moon's entire near side into a reddish darkness. Sadly, unlike this year's previous blood moon lunar eclipse on March 13th to 14th, viewers in the United States will not be invited to the show. Instead, the eclipse will be best seen from Asia and Western Australia, where more than 6 billion people, nearly 77% of the world's population, which that's an interesting percentage, 77%. That is essentially 2/3, right? Because you have 33, which would be a third. So this is almost exactly 2/3 of the Earth's population. Will be privy to the entire total phase of the eclipse, according to time and date. According to time and date. Sky watchers in most of Europe and Africa will be able to catch at least part of totality. They have this model right here. So even Brazil will see a little bit, like a partial, like the east coast of Brazil over here, this tip. But it's mostly going to be this side of the world. And yeah, you have some pretty populous countries like China, India, and so forth. So, but just because we can't see it over here in the United States doesn't mean that it's not significant. In fact, this probably makes it, in one sense, even more significant because so many people are going to be able to see it. And as they do, it doesn't matter what religion they are. These type of events usually have, or they can very easily have, a spiritual impact on people. It's really, I don't know, it's breathtaking. It's profound when you see things like this. And the Lord can use that to his advantage, and he can communicate through these things. He can touch people with the Spirit. So, okay, let's go back here. Can't remember if that was all from this article. Yeah, it is. And it makes me think about this. Okay, with so many people that are going to see this eclipse, it made me think of Elder Stevenson's talk, Days Never to Be Forgotten, from the October 2024 General Conference. This was about the decade never to be forgotten. And in this part, he says, let me explain. Between now, 2024, and 2034, we will experience seminal events that will result in extraordinary opportunities to serve, to unite with members and friends, and to introduce the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to more people than ever before. Then it has a picture of President Nelson's birthday celebration where he turned 100. And he says, we just witnessed the power of a truly historic moment as we celebrated with tens of millions the 100th birthday of President Russell M. Nelson. Reporting on President Nelson's birthday, Newsweek wrote a headline that read, world's oldest religious leader turns 100. They then listed the world's 10 oldest faith leaders, with President Nelson first on a list that included Pope Francis, which none of us knew at the time in October 2024, but he passed away 6 months later, the day after Easter. And then Elder Stevenson continues, and the Dalai Lama. Really quick, I verified it. He is the 14th Dalai Lama, which, I don't know, maybe in Buddhism or to the Buddhist world. Not that I don't know that 7 is necessarily important to them, but I talk a lot about how the Lord works with many different peoples, and it's not just us that have signs or see things. And maybe this is more for us. It's like he's the 14th Dalai Lama. It's a multiple. It's a multiple of 7. But it turns out he is 90 years old. So wouldn't it be really interesting? And I'm not wishing anything against the Dalai Lama at all, but wouldn't it be interesting if President Nelson survives him? You know, this man's 90 years old. President Nelson moves on to become 101, 102, I don't know, 105. Who knows how far it's going to go? But going back to this statement from a New York Times article represents the spirit of much of the international coverage. quote, in a United States presidential election cycle that has prompted soul searching about aging and leadership, Mr. Nelson's milestone suggests that, at least in his church, a triple-digit birthday does not merit much hand-wringing. He remains a popular figure among church members who view their president not just as an executive, but as a prophet, seer, and revelator, end quote. How grateful we are that President Nelson's landmark birthday gave us an opportunity to introduce a global audience, right? An opportunity to introduce a global audience to a prophet of God and a celebration never to be forgotten. So I feel like there's something similar here. Maybe this is like a foreshadowing of things to come. The decade never to be forgotten. This is going to happen the day before his 101st birthday. You don't think that there's going to be more articles written? Like probably every single year that goes by, there's going to be articles written just because it's newsworthy. We've never seen this before in this dispensation. We've never had a prophet this old. So each year that goes by, he's probably going to get more and more and more attention, and it's going to bring attention to the church. You see what I mean? And I don't know, maybe something special is going to happen when he's 101. 101, the number, you have those two ones, and I'll probably do another video about this some other time, but we've already noted that there's been a lot of like a lot of ones, like significant things that have to do with like 11, 111, 101, and stuff like that. In fact, Sister Nelson said that it was at 11:01 p.m. at night that they found out that President Monson had passed away and that President Nelson would become the next president of the church. She remembered that specific detail, and I wouldn't be surprised if, that's a special number to them. I think it's a special number in general. Any numbers that repeat, like 11, 22, 33, I don't know why. I don't know why, but it seems like those are special numbers. The two apostles that President Nelson and President Oaks replaced, they both died on January 11th, exactly 1 year apart. January 11th of 1983 and January 11th of 1984. I think it was LeGrand Richards and Marky Peterson, I think. But do you think that's normal? Do you think it's normal for two apostles, one right after another, to die exactly a year apart like that? And there's more to that story, but I'm just pointing out really briefly that 101 may be a special age for him. We'll see. So just every day that goes by, things just get stranger and stranger and more wondrous and magnificent and incredible. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around all this, but the moon and the president of the church, yeah, the moon seems to point to the president of the church, at least during these last two presidencies. Okay, that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.